Good evening, everybody. Welcome to cEDH Budget Brews channel. We're here to ask a couple questions to our local cEDH players. I'm Cricket. Joining me tonight is Squirrelmob and Timmy T1000. Say hello, guys.
Hey, hello
How's it going,
guys.
man?
And we're going to be discussing this question coming from name here, Nazda. And they're asking, the format as a whole seems very intimidating to get into. What pre-first game recommendation would you have to get over this first hurdle? So I think the first and quickest answer that jumps to everybody's mind is that rule zero talk, right? Discussing what everybody's sort of what they are looking to get out of this game before you start to play it. What power level is everybody at? Is our proxies allowed? Just kind of all this stuff so that to make sure that everybody has fun and establishes what everybody's looking for. But I think other than that, like just knowing your deck. I think knowing your deck is a big part of it too, especially if you're going to play with strangers. Like let them know ahead of time, like, hey, I'm new to this deck. I'm trying some things out. But don't be reading the primer word for word while you're playing, because dragging out, like people are always willing to be patient, but there's a limit to that as well.
There is a limit. Yeah. I would say to get over that hurdle, it's get good, scrub. No. I had to give the meme answer. That's the best part. Honestly, like a lot of the intimidation is just like a boogeyman under the bed. Like it's intimidating because it has the word competitive, and there's like all of these well-written, big worded primers and all of these layering, like all these like all this lingo, like layering and win conless and just all this jargon that gets thrown around. To be honest, the best way to kind of get over that intimidating hurdle is one, to just play a game. Like if you don't have your own cEDH deck and you have friends who play cEDH, ask to play one of their decks. One, they'll be happy to play with you. Two, most likely they'll be more than happy to help walk you through like that first evening or that first couple of games. Reading a primer does help, but goldfishing it on like the primer is usually linked to a deck list, and that deck list is usually on a deck builder website that has a playtest feature. That playtest feature, if you open up one tab with the primer and another tab with the playtest feature, you can kind of goldfish it a few times and then either build it, print it, like build it, proxy it, or borrow it, and then play it. I don't know about you guys, but if I had somebody walk up to me and James when we are at one of our meetups and like, hey, I want to learn about cEDH, I want to play it, but I'm a little nervous, I'd be like, sit down with me right now. I'd probably put him in a headlock, like, come here, kid. But you're not getting away now. Gotcha. But I would. There was a lot of times at the meetups where I would actually just sit down with somebody and then explain why they should keep their hand, why they should mulligan, why they should play these certain cards in a certain way, because you want to play this dork on 1 so you can cast this on turn 2 into that on 3, and not only will it help you curve, but the color combinations will matter, and those little bits of sequencing are kind of nuanced and not always obvious. Sometimes I tell them to make the wrong play because I'm not Patrick Chapin. But and actually like let them play, but then like also like, okay. And then kind of maybe after a game or two, or after a few turns, like they start getting a little comfortable, like, all right, I'll back up a little bit, kind of give them a little, I'll do that all day long, so I don't know. What about you, James?
So I think that with Magic players, we typically see a lot of people who are a little more introverted. That's not to say there aren't people out there who are extroverts and dig the attention and talking to people all over the place. But
I'm not interested.
Especially in like the age that we're currently living in, where people are mostly playing online right now. Still, it's a little hard to talk to people, but I think that's the biggest step. And even before that Rule Zero talk that Cricket talked about, I think talking with people in the place where you're going to be playing is huge. If you're playing at a local game store and you talk to the people there and kind of get the vibe before you go in, if you have established some sort of relationship with someone, that's going to make your experience easier. Same thing with any online platform, whether it's the Nexus or Play EDH or the Reddit, Discord, or
cEDH
cEDH games. They're all effectively LGSs online. So get to know the people there before you dive in. Hang out, ask questions.
A lot of them will let you spectate games.
Yeah, you can spectate games, you can watch, you can ask questions while you're watching, you can really get a feel for what you're getting into before you even sit down at a table. And I think that's a very helpful thing, is just get to know the people who you're going to be playing with.
Right.
The other thing that can be helpful is a little bit of homework, but just having a very basic understanding of a couple of the key things that you're likely to see, right? You should probably know that like Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation is a common way to win the game, and it costs 3 mana. That's helpful to know because it can let you kind of be aware of what's going on. Knowing about generally Breach plus LED, that's usually not a great thing for the other players at the table. Things like that. Because oftentimes, one thing that you might see with players who are slightly more established playing with a newer player is they might see something the newer player doesn't see, and then they don't say anything about it, and the game ends up being lost because maybe the newer player has some sort of interaction, but because there's not enough communication, they don't know what's going on. Right. And so you as a newer player, do a little bit of homework and also ask questions. If you're not sure what's going on, ask.
And most players, especially in a game, like outside of a tournament or a competitive event, obviously, if you're just like, hey, listen, I'm new and I'm at like a decision point where I don't know what to do. Can you guys help me? Maybe you lay your hand out and everybody talks about lines. You may not win that game, but you'll learn. That's another thing I would do a lot with people is like, oh, I don't know what to do, but I've got X, Y, or Z here. And then they're like, oh, well, if you do, and a lot of times just from interacting with other decks, you'll know the lines and how to interact with them. And you can kind of pretend like you're Babe Ruth and call the shots like, oh, yeah, he's going to go that way, before people even do.
I think the big thing here that I really feel like we should establish, though, and dispel this like horrible rumor that always goes around, is that cEDH players are not out to stop everybody that comes up against them. We are not these big scary monsters that are going to scream at you that you're this terrible player. Are there assholes out there? Absolutely. But that's in anything. Like, you're always going to run into those types of people. But the community at large is very welcoming and actually loves new players, because that means our format is growing. And that's ultimately what we want to see. We want to play against people. We want more people to play against. So while, yes, seeing big names, around the servers like Shaper and Wedge and all those other like big name cEDH players might be a little bit intimidating because you're a little starstruck, they're really great guys if you just talk to them. And the same goes for a vast majority of us.
Except for that Shaper guy. Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't pass the dude. Shaper is awesome, by the way.
Another thing that can be helpful, and this is to more established players who may or may not be watching this video, is don't assume everybody knows the same things that you know when you're talking to them. Because sometimes I'll be on like a server and I'll see somebody answer a question that a new player has, and they'll take a tone that seems kind of almost a little bit stuck up, I guess is the best way to put it.
Standoffish, maybe?
Yeah, standoffish is another good way. And that doesn't really help anybody if you're kind of like looking down on somebody asking questions. Because we all asked
Right.
questions at one point. We all had points where we were not as skilled as we are now. And even among players who've been playing cEDH for years, there are people who have a better grasp on things than other people. And that's okay, right? That's totally fine. And especially when you start getting into nitty gritty things, there are some players who know certain decks very, very well and don't know very much about other decks at all. That's fine. There are people who have broad understanding of lots of things but don't know the intricacies of certain lines in certain decks. That's okay too. Not everybody's going to be an expert in everything. And so if you're a player who's more established and been playing cEDH for a while, be understanding of what a new player is looking for.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else to add to this one? I think we kind of covered it pretty broadly. All right.
Be a good neighbor, as Squirrelmob likes to say.
Always be a good
Be a
neighbor.
good neighbor.
Don't take a dump on the couch, right?
Mhm.
Isn't that the analogy?
Take your trash in, or take your trash out, take your trash can back in, don't leave it there for a week, mow your lawn every once in a while.
At least to keep the critters down. God,
Mm-hmm.
the mosquitoes get so bad when you leave the lawn. When you leave your lawn,
Don't let your dog attack the neighbor's dog. Like it's not hard. It's not hard.
No. All right. Now that we're done, old man, how homeowner rambling. Thanks again for joining us, and you guys have a good night.